we're going to get you involved as well. So my name's Sheila McDerment. I'm a business psychologist and a coach. I do training in lots of different areas, but I focus very often on communication and teamwork and leadership, but also well-being and resilience. And I do quite a lot of work. I run my own consultancy. I've done that for 15 years. That means I'm quite expert at working from home because my office is at the end of the garden. So I know for a lot of you this is quite new. But yeah, so it's familiar territory for me. So I suppose that was one of the reasons I was particularly interested in covering this topic. I was trying to think of some motivational words to say to really describe the situation that we find ourselves in. And the scene that came to mind, or the thought that came to mind, was the scene from The Lord of the Rings, which any of you out there will probably recognise. And it's the exchange between Frodo, who's the ring carrier, and Gandalf. And it's when Frodo realises the enormity, I think, of the burden that he's taken on when he says he'll carry the ring. And so the exchange goes like this. I haven't done it as a video because it would probably take up too much of your data. So Frodo says, "I wish none of this had happened." And Gandalf's wise reply is, "So do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All you have to decide is what to do with the time that's given to you." And I thought that was a fairly accurate description of where we find ourselves. We're in a situation that none of us have chosen to be in. We don't want to be in. There's a lot of things happening we don't have control over, but what we do have control over is what we choose to do and how we choose to approach this. So specifically with virtual teams, it's something for a lot of people I know is quite new. We don't know how long we will need to do this for. I suspect that we will find that actually when this ends, and it will, that actually perhaps many more people will end up working from home than they do now. I think it's such
Here are the things that I need. And then you would use collaborative statements like,
"Can Galaxy S9 turn on to mute, please?" Cool, unless it was an interesting conversation, in which case share it. So I suspect that this is such a significant shift in how we work that actually it will probably have long-term consequences. So given that's the case, it makes sense to really think about how we're working with virtual teams and to do what we can to do it as best as we can. So what I'd be really interested to hear from you is I think for most of us, probably 10 days in now to doing working from home, virtual team working. So I'd be really interested just to get a little bit of an idea as to, for you at the moment, what are your challenges in terms of virtual team working? So any thoughts or comments on that in the chat box now would be great. Yeah, keeping morale up. Yeah, Simon, thank you. Judging the impact of what I've said. Yeah, absolutely. Obviously a big challenge trying to coordinate manufacturing of physical items. Yeah. Ensuring everyone's okay. Karen, with everyone being online, often Zoom and WebEx crashes, so you don't often get a very good experience of online meetings. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Juggling work with children. Oh, hi, Becca. Yeah, I can imagine that's a real challenge. And I think I will touch on, I haven't got any magic solutions, but I'll definitely touch on that because I think there are a lot of people in your situation. So having worked at home with small children a few years ago now, then we'll definitely look at that. Hi, Rich. Yeah, so visual and inherently 3D ideas. Yeah, when you're effectively working with a 2D platform, that's absolutely, I can see that's going to be an issue. Balanced toddler and working full time. I think Sarah, you've probably just summarised where many people are at the moment, and making sure that those who are more vulnerable are able to take good care of themselves. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And so thank you all for those comments. And that, I mean, that very much echoes what I would have expected, and very much reflects the themes that we're going to be picking up on, because from the conversations that I've had, I would say that there are many people who are who are working in similar situations to yourself and experiencing the same kind of challenges. So these are the three things that we're going to look at specifically. Clearly, there are a lot of things you can look at with regards to virtual teams, but these seem to be the three really key ones that have come up a lot in the conversations I've been having in the last few days. And one is about staying focused and dealing with the anxiety. Anxiety seems to be a word that I'm hearing time and time again. And it's something you might be dealing with it quite well yourself, but you'll probably know other people who are not coping quite as well. So what are the practical things that we can do to deal with that? Staying connected, virtual communication and virtual teams. We need to work in that space, so let's do it as well as we can. And also staying well at home. So both looking after yourself if you're managing a team, but also thinking about how you actually look after and help those people who are your team members as well. So so hopefully I should be able to pick up on a lot of the comments that you've made. If there are other questions that I can't specifically address or don't have the time to answer this morning, then obviously do contact me at the end of this, either through Cambridge Network or email me or LinkedIn, and I'll pick up with them in more detail with you directly. Okay, so anxiety. Uncertainty causes anxiety, and that's very much where we are at the moment, because there are so many things that we don't know. It's very easy to feel anxious about that. And in any situation that's stressful, whatever your default tends to be, you do more of it. So if you're typically somebody who worries, then you'll worry more. If you're typically somebody who's anxious, then you'll be more anxious. So it's a fairly normal scenario. And it can really get in the way of getting us in the right headspace to stay focused and to do the work that we need to do as effectively as possible. So what I just wanted to run through with you is just a few thoughts and tips and techniques about things that you can do to really make sure that you keep focused. It's about keeping your head in the right place. There's a lovely picture for you there to have a little look at, sunset on Brancaster Beach. If in doubt, I always just keep the idea of a Norfolk beach in mind. That works for me. So a couple of things to think about is check the facts. What do we actually know? And that can be quite hard at the moment, because there is a lot. You can look at the facts and still actually not know the veracity of them. So that can be a challenge. But one of the typical thinking errors that we often make is that we catastrophize. So things become bigger and bigger in our heads. And if you have somebody like that, or if you're conscious of doing it yourself, then actually just getting that person to do a reality check is really helpful. So just ask them, what are you basing that on? What do you actually know? It was a really good way of bringing something that can feel really something quite huge and uncontrollable into something that's a little bit more manageable. Control is another important aspect here. So what can we do? What's within our control? So psychologists have known for a long time that actually lack of control produces stress. So that's probably one of the reasons that we're seeing so many people stockpiling, is that it feels like buying things is something that we can control, and so that's what we do. And while I'm not suggesting that as a particularly helpful action, there are things that we can do that will actually help. So think about what is within your control and focus on that. If you're worried about staying healthy, then follow the government advice around washing hands, social distancing. What can you do at home? What are the things that if you suddenly have a gift of time, perhaps if you're now not working, how can you use that? There's a really useful idea that comes from cognitive behavioral approaches, and it's the idea of attentional control. And sometimes when things get too much for us, we feel like our head feels like it's a little bit all over the place. And sometimes a really useful technique is just focus on the next thing. Just do one thing. And there's a great little technique called the Pomodoro technique. And it's just a very simple approach where you go, I'm going to focus on doing something definite, whether it's work-wise or whether it's the ironing, and I'm going to do it for 25 minutes. And then I will stop and I will have a 5-minute break. And you set a timer for 25 minutes and then you work for that period. because most of us can concentrate for that length of time. So if you break the time down into something that feels more manageable, it's much easier just to feel like you have a sense of control. So work 25 minutes, take a 5-minute break, then set the timer again and do it again. So if you need a way of really focusing and getting a bit of impetus towards working, it can be a really helpful approach. It works for kids as well. So if any of you are homeschooling, it's a really, really good approach to use. The other things probably to think about, one is beware the negativity bias. We all have one. We're naturally wired to look out for the negative things in life. And the reason is probably from an evolutionary perspective, this has kept us well and healthy. And you might argue it's an appropriate thing to do at the moment, to be focusing on the negative stuff. The problem is that actually, if we do that a lot, it will increase your anxiety. One of the interesting approaches for people who actually suffer from depression is they're told often to limit the amount of news that they watch, because while it's important to stay informed, much of the news focuses on the bad stories, and that's because that's what we focus into, because we have a negativity bias. And what you get is this negative drip, drip, drip effect. So it can really pull you down. So I would say, yes, stay informed. But if it feels like all the bad news is really having an impact on you, just limit the amount of time that you're actually paying attention to the news. Just give your brain a break, focus on something more positive. So yeah, and that which takes me on to the next point, which is focus on the positives, because even in the situation where we find ourselves at the moment, there are so many positive things, and it's like an antidote to that negativity bias. It's almost for every negative thought you have, to equal that out, you need to have 3 positives. And this isn't just a fluffy, this is a good thing to do. There's plenty of research that shows that this positive approach has really positive effects on both mental and physical health. So it really is, it has a very definite and recognized impact. So I'm going to share some of the things I'm currently feeling positive about, and then I would love to hear yours. So this is where we are at the moment. So on the left is that's my little Westie Lockie. He couldn't be more delighted at the moment because he's currently got 4 people at home all walking him. So he will probably have the paws walked off him quite soon. So he's one very happy dog. Top right is the lovely picture my daughter shared with me, that some of you might well have seen this, and this is Venice. The difference between now and a month ago is there are now swans in the canals in Venice, and there are now fish in the canals. And the reason is because one of the unintended benefits of the situation we find ourselves is the environmental impact. So that in Venice, the water quality has improved so much, suddenly the wildlife is coming back. So it's not something that anybody wanted, but it's interesting to see what a positive impact that has had from an environmental perspective. The bottom right, most of you would probably recognise that image. That's Great St Mary's Church in Cambridge. So that's a reference really to Cambridge and creativity in a crisis. And I'm sure you have lots of examples of this yourselves. One that I can share is my husband is currently working on a project making ventilators for the NHS. I can now mention that because it was in the news yesterday. They have done 1 year's work in terms of development in 2 weeks, which is certainly something, if you'd asked them 2 weeks ago whether that could happen, I don't think anyone would have thought it would, and it could, but it has. So a crisis always, one way or another, provides the opportunity for creativity and innovation. So those are some of the positive things that I'm feeling good about at the moment. So just take a minute, and I'd love to hear yours if you could message me in the chat box. Glorious sunshine. Yeah, it feels like the weather's finally given us a break, hasn't it? It's stopped raining, which is amazing. Springtime, yeah, totally. I love the fact that nature just gets on and does its stuff, irrespective of what we're up to. My dogs are loving it too, I bet they are. I'm winning at homeschooling every day, and I'm more relaxed about it. And I bet most of us would not have said that we could have done homeschooling a few weeks ago. Time to read and look at self-development. That's a really nice call. Yeah, I have a pile of books I want to work through. Sarah, my son and family are healthy. Yeah, that's great, isn't it? Because that's just about, is everything okay now? And if it is, and if it's okay today, then really hold on to that thought. Daily yoga, that's brilliant. Alison, appreciating each other more. Yeah, the time to slow down a bit and reflect on what's really important. I think that's really interesting. It almost feels like the world's hit the pause button, whether we wanted it to or not. Um, Joe Wick is indeed great. Yes, I have heard that. Time to catch up with the jobs you haven't had time to do. Yeah, I think we're going to have cleaner houses and tidier gardens than we have done for a very long time. Not commuting for 2 hours a day. That's a lovely one. So for any of you who commute, I was just talking to Sarah, who at Cambridge Network, who you spoke to a minute ago, just before we started. And we worked out between us that she's got 5 hours back a week that she didn't have before. And that's, for any of you who are commuting, then that would be the same. So that there's a benefit that nobody really expected, but it's there. Hearing from friends more, actual calls rather than just text. Yeah, that's lovely, isn't it? So we talked about social distancing, but it isn't. You can still be social, you just can't be sociable in the same place. So it's just that the way that we do that has changed. Not, sorry, Catherine, I'm loving that. I'll just mention that last one, not needing to spend any money. Yes, isn't that interesting? For sure. And the kindness of strangers. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, slimes and waves, smiles and waves. That makes much more sense. Okay, so that's cool. And it's a really nice, it's a lovely thing to do. And it is definitely something that you could think about just incorporating into your team meetings. Just share something you're feeling positive about, because if you've got a team meeting with 5, 6, 10 people, and all of you share one positive thing, then you spend 5 or 10 minutes focusing in on that, and it just recalibrates everything. So it doesn't feel like everything in the world is quite as negative as it's easy to believe. Okay, so what I'm going to do is we're going to move on to the stay connected piece. Let me just explain this well-being wheel. So when I do work on well-being, this is the model that I use. And the idea is that these are 4 key areas that really connect into your well-being. So to stay connected, to get enough sleep, to eat well, and to move. And the idea is that we should be nourishing each of these 4 areas, because if it's a wheel and they're nourished, it should end up looking like a wheel. So if you imagine it rolling, it'll be a fairly smooth journey. If any one of those areas has a big chunk out of it, so we're not spending so much time and attention or looking after that bit, your wheel will still turn, but it's going to be a bit of a bumpier journey. So we're going to focus in on the connect bit, because that's one piece that I think is particularly challenging at the moment, and certainly worth spending a bit of time and attention on. Okay, so staying connected. So there's no doubt at all, and some of you are probably finding this already. Well, I mean, you've commented to this effect already, haven't you? That virtual teams do come with their own challenges. One of the main reasons for this is, for teams to work effectively, people need to feel connected and they need to trust each other. So you're probably familiar with the idea of psychological safety, and it's that idea that it's okay to speak up, to voice your ideas, to contribute, to say what's on your mind, and we will do that if we feel safe within a group. And one of the challenges for virtual working is that very often that feeling of being connected and that feeling of trust and psychological safety actually comes from spending time with each other and developing a relationship. So that is a challenge if you're working remotely. I would imagine most of you are working in existing teams, so you do already have that basis of knowledge and understanding. So you have a basis in reality, so to speak, before you actually have needed to work virtually. So that will definitely help. But certainly, I mean, the research would suggest that personal relationships and face-to-face communication is really what builds trust rather than electronic communication. And with all the work that I do around communication with groups in organisations, I can't begin to think of the amount of times I've said, if there is a problem, go and meet with that person face to face and have a conversation. We may not be able to meet with them face to face, but we can still have the conversation. So that is a really key, an important message to focus on. There is the potential, it doesn't need to happen, but there is the potential risk in virtual teams of having more task conflict. And often you can end up with a situation where it takes longer to actually make decisions. So those are some of the potential challenges. However, as with most challenges, there are solutions, which we will come on to in a moment. The reason I thought it might be useful is just to explain a little bit about why some of those issues with regards to, for example, task conflict come about. And one of the things that's missing, and I know a couple of you have picked up on it already in the messages that you sent through earlier, is that because we're in a virtual context, there is much less non-verbal communication than we would normally get. So even if we can see each other, as we can now, you don't get the same, there's a felt sense of communication that you get when you're all in the room together. Much of our communication is unconscious. Very often we don't even know where that's coming from, but we're really, really sensitive to picking it up. And it's because so much of our life is spent in groups and in teams. It's a really fundamental way that society is organized. So there's a huge amount of information there that in a virtual context we don't have. So you can see if you say something and two people glance at each other and you'll get an idea as to what they thought about your comments, or if they shrug or they smile, you have an idea as to how that's actually being received. I did my first online training session yesterday because of the the broadband issues people were having. They were using just audio rather than a video connection. Which meant that I did feel like I was talking to myself for a few hours because I didn't have the information that I would usually have in order to really get a feel for whether it was making sense, whether it was interesting, whether it was relevant, or whether I just needed to move on. So that's one of the big issues, really. The other aspect to think about is it's very easy to miss out on the bit around relational communication. So how we I have Valerie on the line. I'll try again. So the relational communication bit, it's like it's around the coffee conversation. So I realised I'm doing an MSc at the moment. And last week I spent 2 days just on Zoom, just training. And the bit that I really missed is we got to lunchtime, and generally we'd go and have lunch together. And then you get to have that conversation around, well, what did you think? And what was good? And did that make sense? And I don't get this. And how are you? And what's happening in your life and world? And all of that bit doesn't happen. So it can happen, but we need to make a deliberate focus on that. The other aspect, and you're probably getting it and will have had experience of this over the last week or 10 days, is that when it's this kind of interaction, it's much harder to maintain energy levels, and it's much harder to keep your attention, because while you're in a room together, you've made a commitment to sit in that room together. So you're mentally much more engaged. In this kind of context, if you want to pick up your emails, you absolutely can do. Same with the phones. I mean, if you turn your audio off, you can be doing whatever you want, really. So it's other things compete for your attention. So technology sometimes gives us the illusion of communication without it really being the full experience. So hence the picture of the 2 tin cans and the string at the bottom. For those of you old enough, you might well remember trying to do this as a kid, and you can use the 2 tin cans, have the string, make a telephone, and you can kind of hear a little bit of what the other person's saying. And it feels a little bit like that when we're working in this kind of virtual environment. So that's why some of those challenges very much come about. However, as I said, where there's a challenge, there is always a solution. And I'm sure some of you, or many of you, are aware of this, but it's just worth really focusing in and thinking about, well, what's working for you and are you doing it? So what's your netiquette? How do you actually set up your team meetings and your team communications? Just thinking about things like, how do you take turns? How do you know whose turn it is to speak? How do you know how are you going to show that you're listening to each other? How are you going to make decisions? So really, in the same way that you would want to do if you were all working together, it's really worth focusing in on the process of meetings as well as the tasks. So is the format of the meeting actually working? And if it isn't, then review it. And it's equally really useful just to be really open and honest and say that this working online thing is much harder. It doesn't always work as smoothly. So get people to comment on that process. Get people to give their feedback. Make it okay to say, I'm not finding this that easy, because if you have the conversations, then absolutely you can resolve that. In terms of the relational communication bit, have the check-ins, have the informal chat. Sarah was just telling me that Cambridge Network are going to have a coffee meeting. I think, was it tomorrow? Yeah. And the plan is you have to bring your coffee, bring a snack, and absolutely not talk about work, and definitely not talk about coronavirus. And you can talk about anything else. And that's just such a great solution really to this kind of challenge. So we can do it. We just need to be a bit creative about how we do it. For me, humour is really important, and I think that's absolutely key. And I mean, there are so many funny little coronavirus clips and jokes going around. I saw the most amazing Ladybird book of COVID-19 this morning, which is definitely worth a read if you can get hold of a copy. Video where possible, because if it's not perfect, but it's much better. So about a third of our understanding in terms of communication just comes from the body language, comes from the non-verbal communication. So when we don't have that, we're losing a huge chunk of the information to really know how the person is feeling. So if you're somebody who is needing to be aware of how the other people in your team are doing, then video is really key, because it's if somebody's texting, they can text and say they're fine, but if you're actually on a video conference with them, it might be clear that it's not so much the case. So just be really aware of that and use it where possible. So the moral of the story is communicate more frequently, make it a really clear process, focus in on it, because there is none of the unintentional communication really that you get when you're all working in the office together. So it's something that you just need to make a very conscious process. So it's almost like you need to shout it louder, but in a virtual way. Do it more often, and really focus in on it. Two other things, and then I'd just be interested in getting your thoughts on what we've covered so far. There is a lot about working in a team that's exactly this. You need to be focusing in on the same stuff, whether it's virtual or whether you're all working in the same place. So these are some of the key aspects that you want and you would need for a high performing team. So it's exactly the same. Just beware of is the mission, what you're trying to achieve as a team, is it clear? Is it actually, has it changed? Meet regularly, even if it's just virtually, and then work closely just to be really clear as to how you're actually linking in with the others, and equally do you have enough autonomy to actually get on with your job. I'm just going to pick up on this message that's come through on the chat. How are businesses supposed to cope with the fact that lots of this communication they get for free when employees are off the clock? I'm not getting paid and can easily go and hang out with my wife and my kids. Why would I be inclined to sit in a web chat with my colleagues? Okay, well, that's a fair question. Why would you want to sit in a web chat with your colleagues? Because the relationships that you have with your team enable you to get the job done more effectively. So it's never just focusing on the task will never get you all the way. It's having that understanding how the individuals are getting on, and understanding how you are working together as a team that will enable you to be effective. So it supports your functioning as a team. So that's really would be the rationale behind doing it. And I guess it doesn't need to be that long. And if you're not commuting, you probably have more time in your day anyway. So that there might just be a few things to think about. The last bit I'm going to talk about, and then I'd be really, yeah, and that good comment. So make it paid, make it paid, make it part of the normal working day. I think that's a really good comment. Lunchtime casual chats with colleagues, and it does work quite well. Okay, so yeah, thanks for that, Finley. I think that's a really good suggestion. Just a couple of things for managers, and then I'd be keen to open it up to you folks and get your thoughts on this. So you need to still be having one-to-ones. So make sure you schedule time for that. And again, I would say almost possibly more often. What tends to happen is when we're very busy, that's the bit that very often gets squashed out. And I would say in terms of staying connected, it's even more important than ever. You still need to be measuring and managing performance. So just think about how you're able to do that, setting clear expectations, providing feedback, all the things that you would be doing anyway, but just make sure that you're still focusing in on that. I can't see the next two slides because the chat box has snuck in the way. Yeah, development. So this is, a few of you have mentioned this is the opportunity to read. Maybe if you're in a situation where you are actually doing slightly less work, this is an opportunity that development is you have the time for the learning and development. Maybe make the opportunity, make the most of it. The final part I would say that's absolutely key, particularly for everyone, but particularly for managers, is are you being supported? Because as a manager, there is an expectation as part of that role that you are supporting other people, but you need to look after yourself as well. So one of the things that I've learned working for myself is that you don't have, there isn't a support network that's automatically there in the way that it would be if you were working in an office. However, it is still there. You just have to make the contacts and make sure that you access the support network, and just think who can you talk to. So if it's somebody at home and you'll be at home, then that might be an option. Think about coaching, think about other friends outside of the organisation. So tap into that support network to make sure that you're getting the help that you need. Okay, I feel like I've talked long enough, so I'd just be really interested to pick up on any questions on that piece around staying connected. So any questions or any thoughts that you'd like to share? So Karen says, we have a buddy system and we're responsible for checking in with our buddy, not just work topics, but a general chit chat. Yeah, that's a fantastic idea, Karen. And actually, even when we were all working in offices, buddy systems work really well and a great check-in for mental health. So that would work very well as well in a virtual environment. So that's a really good thought. What if we can't schedule a visual meeting? We all have kids. One person is working 5 a.m. to 8 a.m., etc. Yeah, absolutely. I totally get that. And I would just say it's going to be different for everyone. If you can't schedule a visual meeting, clearly I understand that. But if you could perhaps make it part of what you do. The other thing is having kids is okay. You know, it's really interesting. You get a much better understanding of people as to who they are, because there's an aspect of their home life which becomes part of the way this works. So I think for me, you know, dogs are okay, animals, kids, all good. It's just all part of who we are. Have a Slack coffee break channel has been working really well. Just having a constantly open Zoom channel too. Okay, Slack's working well. Slack channels are great. Keeping a WhatsApp team chat, non-work related. Okay, that's fantastic. And the idea, I've seen a WhatsApp team chat that was just about exchanging the humorous side of it. So with that can be quite a fun thing to do as well. What are we supposed to talk about other than work and coronavirus? I don't think much else is going on in my life anymore. Okay. Yeah, that's a fair point, really. So coronavirus is taking up a big part of our life. So maybe that's the challenge, is actually find something that's different. My son's decided to take up the ukulele, read a book, paint something, do something different. Just make a point of focusing in on something that is different. That's not work, it's not coronavirus, it's something different. Simon, WhatsApp group for my team works well. We share fun bits as well as work. We've banned virus chat. I don't think that's a bad bet, you know, is to maybe at least part of the day, if not all of it. Share recipes and exercise plans, Claire. I think that's an inspired idea. We've been pretty creative with our chats and photos of bookcases, the story behind the mug, etc. Yeah, that's great. Have creative challenges. And I've been knitting a lot recently. Yeah, I think we'll be tapping into a lot of skill sets where perhaps we just haven't really spent so much time doing. Competitions from home, such as baking. Yeah, that's a brilliant idea. We're going to try a virtual pub quiz, Finley. Yeah, brilliant. Why not? I'm going to a virtual dinner party on Friday, so that will be interesting. I'll be interested to see how that's going. So, I mean, that's fantastic. So, I mean, clearly, what's lovely is you've clearly picked up on a lot of the really key aspects here. We're going to do show and tell tomorrow at the end of our week. Well, why not? I mean, the kids are probably still doing that for their homeschooling, aren't they? So why not do the same? We've asked everyone to upload their working from home view. Yep, lots going on through our sports and social club, mental health first aid workers, including a yoga class for every Monday. Sunflower going competition. Caps lock on, yeah, that's fine. I guess you weren't too angry about that, Claire, it's fine. Need to plant mine. Not shouting, I got that, you're good. Okay, that's lovely. Thank you so much for that. Okay, so I'm going to move on just to a little bit around the staying well at home piece. I mean, I'm hugely reassured by all the messages I'm seeing because clearly you're doing a lot of really good things. One of the challenges from having done it for a fair number of years now, I think, to think about when you're working from home is boundaries. So this can be physical boundaries, and it can be in terms of shared responsibilities with the kids, it can be time boundaries, but it's really important just to get them in place. So just some things to think about is if you can possibly have a place at home that you work that's not where you eat and is not where you sleep, then that is a good thing. I know that's not always a possibility for everyone. Is there somewhere quiet, a little corner in the house somewhere that you can take as yours? I know there have been some great videos online about people making their own desks. Crates and a plank were involved. So I think, you know, if you can, and even if it's, so even if you're thinking, if you're still working at a dining room table, almost sit in a different place to eat and a different place to work, because even that shift means that you're mentally putting yourself in a different place. So just think about how that works. One of the key negative impacts in terms of our ability to sleep well is actually porous home work boundaries. And by that I mean it's really easy for work to kind of creep into the evening and you don't have the opportunity to relax before you go to bed. So just have a think about how that's playing out. Is there a way that you can actually say, make the work stop and then go into your home mode? Just chatting with Sarah before, she was saying she's working at home during the day. You're so glad we had this conversation now, Sarah, aren't you? And then she goes for a run, and then when she comes back, she's effectively at home. And I think that's a really nice example of putting in place a boundary. One of the challenges, I think, and Becca, you picked up on it, is what if you're at home and you've got kids? And absolutely, that's the biggest, I mean, that's a huge challenge, and I get that. And I don't have a magic solution, but I think some of the things to think about is if both partners are at home, do a timeshare with the kids. So agree between you who's going to look after them when. And that might be around, well, what work do you have to do? At what point during the day do you need to actually connect with other people? Because that might be the opportunity to ask your partner to look after the kids. So it's just about, and there isn't going to be a perfect solution, but like all of these things, it's about really identify what the issues are and then think about putting something in place that's going to enable you to do that as well as you can. Veronica just says, give me a big house then. I totally get that, and I'm sorry. If I could, I absolutely would. So it's just about being a little bit creative. And if you don't have the space to make those physical boundaries, then I think the mental distinction between now I have finished work and now I've gone into home mode is a useful thing to do. The other aspects that I wanted just to really pick up on quickly is just the other three aspects of the well-being wheel. So we've talked about staying connected, but clearly sleep and what we're eating and whether we're moving are really important here. And I'm absolutely not going to preach, but just as a really simple thing to think about, if we follow the government advice around washing our hands and social distancing, that will always help. But actually, if we stay connected, if we sleep, if we eat well, if we move, it's the most fantastic way that we can keep our immune system boosted. So actually, it puts us physically in a much better place to actually cope with whatever might come. Because we're talking about virtual team working here, and the assumption is that everyone will be well and healthy. It's clearly much easier for a team to work if it has all its members. So if you are managing, you need to be looking out for your own health, but you also need to be encouraging your team to be thinking about looking after yourself. I got distracted by the chat box, looking after themselves as well. So just a couple of really simple things to think about. So sleeping, I mean, the magic number, there's been a lot about sleep in the last year or two in the news. So I think we're probably much more aware of the importance of this than we used to be. 8 hours is the magic number you're looking at. Don't beat yourself up if you don't get 8 hours. If you've got kids, I totally understand the challenge there. But it's just giving yourself the opportunity to go to sleep. And the key one here is absolutely making the distinction between stopping work, relaxing in the evening, because you will sleep better. Equally, if you get outside during the day, daylight, exercise, all of that will contribute to your ability to sleep well. And there's a direct connection between getting enough sleep and having a robust immune system. So it's definitely something that's worth thinking about. And let's face it, we have a little bit more time back in our lives now, because 8 hours is not scientifically a bad number. Okay, some disagreement about that. Go for 7, go for 7.5, but certainly anything more than 7 is a good thing. Okay, 8 hours in bed. I'm loving this, because clearly people are really, clearly everyone's very aware of this. 8 hours in bed, not total sleep time. Okay. The moral of the story is, I think, just be thinking about it. Make sure you're getting enough of it. Just rest. Okay, that sounds good. Eating, again, just a few things to think about. I mean, we've all heard the messages. I mean, the key thing, I think for me, the key thing at this point is actually about 70% of our immune system activity happens in or around our gut. So we can, if we're eating well, fruit, veg, pulses, lean protein, then we're really, really helping ourselves in terms of boosting our immune system. Probably the watch out that some of you might be aware of as well is that if where you're working is close to the kitchen, those snacks are very, very tempting. So just be thinking about how that's working for you, whether it might be a question of putting the biscuits away and taking the fruit out and leaving that somewhere obvious. I'm absolutely not going to preach, but it's just, I think the link between what we eat and the immune system is, I think, is really interesting. Social distance from the fridge. Good thinking. I like that. Thank you for that suggestion. And then the last one is just move. So 2 aspects to this. And one is that actually, particularly if you're somebody who suffers in any way with back issues, you should be moving away from your desk every half hour. It's really easy when you don't have a reason to particularly get up and go and, for example, meet with a colleague, just to sit for much longer periods of time. So just really think about ensuring that you're doing that. We are at the moment able to go outside and get some fresh air and exercise. The sun is in our favor. So let's really make the most of that. Because again, it's good for your physical well-being and mental well-being, and again, direct connection with the immune system. So it's really worth thinking about. I would just say, just be aware, sorry, the quality of this one, but this was the one that amused me. Just be aware of this one. Okay, so I mean, that is everything from me. So my final message is this, and we have a few minutes. So if anyone has any questions or anything I can answer or help with, or wants to share some ideas with the group, then please do. Will the recording of this be available? I think so, Sarah, is that right?
Yes, yeah, we'll be sending around the presentation and the recording of this to you all afterwards, so that's not a problem.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. No worries, Becca. See you soon. Thanks. Good info. Good stuff. Stay connected, everyone. Absolutely. Lovely. Thank you. Thank you for all those thank yous. Save lives by doing nothing. What a great, I like that as a take on this situation. You're absolutely right. Could you make this weekly? Yeah, I mean, any other requests that you have in terms of what areas you'd like to focus in on, then definitely feed those back to Sarah, and we'll accommodate that as best as we can. And equally, if there are quite a few things that I've just touched on, and if there are any of those that you want to spend a bit more time exploring, then that's probably something that we could look to do as well.
Can I just add to that, Sheila, that we're planning on putting on about two of these free webinars a week starting from next week. So if you've got any topics that you'd like us to cover, then please just send me an email and we'll be able to cover as many things as possible.
Okay, that's fantastic. Lovely. Thank you for that, Sarah. Good stuff. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Claire. I think we're there. I think we're good to go.
Yeah, doesn't look like there's any immediate questions. So as I said, we'll send around the recording and the presentation. And if anything else you need to ask us or ask Sheila, then please feel free to email and we'll be able to help you as much as possible.
Absolutely. Lovely. Thank you all. Thanks, everyone.
Great. We'll log off now. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Bye.
Bye.